Kirby is no stranger to experimental entries. Even in the early days, Kirby was getting puzzle games, a grab bag of tiny games, a Puyo Puyo reskin, golf, and later on there'd be racing games, a 2D Pikmin clone, a fighting game, but Kirby and the Amazing Mirror is extra weird. A handheld entry in the series that reimagines the core gameplay as a Metroidvania, highly centered on co-op gameplay, one of the few entries in the genre to be focused on multiplayer, but also perhaps the only one that isn't focused on permanent upgrades. The game was a very joint venture. HAL Laboratory produced the game, the first Kirby game following Sakurai heading out to be the Smash Bros. Man, and was developed by Flagship and DIMPS. Flagship being a joint venture between Capcom, Sega, and Nintendo that worked on a number of Resident Evil games and its cousin Dino Crisis, the handheld Zelda games like Minish Cap and the Oracle duology, and 2 Kirby games. While DIMPS is best known for the Sonic handheld games like the Advance and Rush series, but also a number of Digimon games and Street Fighter 4 and 5. So really it's an odd Capcom spin-off like the Oracle games with a bit of that Sega jank thrown on top. Kirby and the Amazing Mirror initially released for the Gameboy Advance in 2004, but would also appear on the 3DS and Wii U Virtual Consoles and Switch's online service just a few years ago, with online multiplayer to boot. As you can tell from the footage, this works fantastically. Amazing Mirror has a lot of issues when it comes to being a Metroidvania. Kirby is fun, he's a flexible character who can be anything, float anywhere, but is also completely reliant on nearby enemies to use his abilities that are essential to navigation. Kirby doesn't exactly gain abilities. The only permanent upgrades in the game are area maps and 4 health upgrades, each granting an additional hit, so the game often finds itself in a pile of odd issues. In normal Metroidvanias, when you see an obstacle you don't have a tool for, you make a note to come back later when you can progress in that direction, and when you have the relevant ability, you come back. In Kirby, when you see an obstacle you need to pass with a specific ability and lack it, you look around the room to find an enemy you need, it isn't there, you sigh, warp back to the hub world, and try to find a warp room that gets you close to the ability you need, then you warp back to the hub room, find the warp room nearest to where you were, try to carry it through the level to the point you need it, one hit and you need to scramble to save it, never mind when you get hit near pits or underwater where it's just gone, and then you can finally progress. The best workaround the game offers is the ability to call a co-op partner to you, if you communicate to them to go find the ability you need, but that only applies in multiplayer because anytime you call the AI, they show up with beam and then wander off on their own pointless adventure. They can even do it mid-boss fight, they'll just leave. I have a few backseat developer ideas to fix a lot of the issues I have with this game. One being to turn the game into Milky Way wishes, where you slowly assemble a collection of powers you can call upon at any time. Another being, more upgrades. Maybe taking more hits to lose an ability, maybe using the phone to call in powers at the cost of battery, maybe upgrades to abilities that give them wider utility. Just anything to make exploring more rewarding and less tedious. There are only a few obstacles, which doesn't really help. Cupid, Master, Smash, Cutter, and Sword can cut ropes, a good amount of abilities that makes it very easy to find one, and I'm fairly sure that there's only one necessary rope and maybe 2 or 3 others for goodies. Mini can squeeze through tight gaps, this is only necessary to get a single health upgrade, and the room you need to use it in has the enemy in it, so it's more a fun gimmick than anything. Missile, Smash, Burning, Hammer, Rock, Throw, and UFO can break metal blocks, although these are mostly rare abilities. Smash, Hammer, and Throw only come from mini-bosses, and UFO just doesn't show up much even in the late game. Hammer and Rock can also pound stakes into the ground, and I think there's literally one fuse in the game, but Bomb, Burning, Fire, Laser, and UFO can set fuses on fire to activate cannons. Also, I guess you could make an argument that Wheel can zip through some timed sections a little easier, but I don't know how much that counts. Perhaps the only obstacles in the game that really manage to be interesting are these mole doors that dig underground quickly after being approached, and which can be tackled with any number of powers depending on your angle of approach to progress. Level design is also quite lacking in general. I don't know. Each area is comprised of 20 odd interchangeable rooms that may have one small ability puzzle for a secret exit and an amount of enemies that scales with each world. The most interesting rooms that come to mind are like fully underwater sections for the wrong reasons, and this stupid canon one that is really not fun online where the timing is just completely fucked. You could probably shuffle around any 2 rooms in the game and nobody would ever know. The ability lineup is good for what it's worth. This is one of the simple ability Kirby games. Most abilities only have 1 attack, but there's a good amount of fairly fun ones on top of the classics. The new ones are Cupid, which lets Kirby fly and fire arrows up to 3 when charged. Magic spins a roulette, giving you items, invincibility, screen nuking. It's a silly one-off ability that sometimes hits big when you need it. Master, which is Meta Knight's sword and a variant on sword with an upward slash and the ability to shoot beams on top of the slashing, stabbing, and dive bombing. Mini Mini is a gimmick for a very few short segments. Kirby becomes tiny but can't puff up or attack. Missile can be steered around in the air and explodes on contact. It's a very fun way to get around, even if it's rare that the levels actually have the space to pull it off. And Smash from Kirby's Smash Bros. Moveset, with his jab, final cutter, stone, and hammer. It's a fantastic navigation ability, but is extremely limited in availability, as you can only get it from either killing Master Hand or Crazy Hands. Plenty of old abilities show up too. Beam, Bomb, both burning and fire. Probably could have just left those two combined. Cook and Crash are one-off screen nukes. Cutter, Fighter, the most complex ability by a mile, with jabs, uppercuts, dash attacks, jump attacks, and the like. Hammer, Ice, Laser. When you get this, there's pretty often some funny slopes to redirect its projectiles off of, including one of the boss fights, which I absolutely love. Parasol, Sleep just for the fun of it. Spark, Stone, Throw, which has a staggering 4 attacks. Tornado, UFO, which lets you move omnidirectionally at all times, but is otherwise just a slightly better beam. And Wheel. Imagine how cool this roster would be with upgrades to flesh some of these out. As for like the areas themselves, the lack of level design kinda makes them a bit hard to say too much about. Rainbow Route is the generic grassy area and also the largest, with the most exits to other worlds, as it serves as a kind of hub area, even though it's still kind of a world of its own. And the central area serves as a warp room that has multiple mirrors that can pass you to other areas easily and quickly after pressing a switch to unlock said door. Moonlight Mansion has a fun haunted manor theming and a unique twist on Wispy Woods with the King Golem. Cabbage Cavern is, they're like these weird purple caves. They don't look like much and are kind of cramped. The boss is a big mole who appears in a few different spots, and this one's very good with the laser, very funny. Mustard Mountain is the lava zone, a bit more hazardous, and has Krako as a boss. I mean, I guess I'm glad to see it, but why, what are you doing in a volcano? Carrot Castle's a bit more puzzly, I guess, with the cannon room and the mini room, and has the best boss Mega Titan, who needs to be bullied into the electricity on either end of the room to damage him, which is a pretty fun gimmick and lets every ability shine in its own way. Olive Ocean is 70% water levels, including the boss Gobbler, which is just awful. Peppermint Palace is the obligatory ice world with ice physics and has Wiz as a boss. He's pretty fun with his unpredictable projectiles and summons that keep him pretty engaging. Radish Ruins is endless rooms of enemy spam with a confusing layout, and Dark Meta Knight is a boss who's basically identical to Meta Knight from every other game, and Candy Constellation is bottomless pits and enemy spam, ending in a fight with Master Hand and Crazy Hand together. I really don't have a ton to say about any of the above. The worlds can be tackled in any order, which is kinda neat, but doing so doesn't get you any permanent upgrades or anything. You're not really sequence breaking, you just have to go back and do the other levels with the abilities that Kirby already would have had if he went there earlier. At best, you get slightly better access to rare abilities, all while continuing to aimlessly wander around looking for entrances to the other areas and the obscure routes to bosses. As an aside, I'd like to ask, why does opening the map open it for every single player? It makes navigation so fucking painful that you're trying to get somewhere, and every time you open the map, all your friends yell at you and say you don't need the map. Yes, I do. I don't know how to get where I'm going. I don't know. Perhaps the most notable thing in this game is the endless parade of final bosses, beginning with a rematch against Dark Meta Knight, then Dark Mind's 7 phases. 4 in his standard form on slightly different arenas where he teleports around shooting endless projectiles with platforming segments between. These go on way too long, but are fine. Dark Mind holds pretty still, he's not too difficult. The projectiles he spits out give you powers and keep things kinda interesting, even if you're liable to lose your power pretty quickly. You know, it works out well enough. His second form is the obligatory Cosmic Nightmare, and for some reason the invincible mirrors that circled him before become the weak spots without warning, which is really confusing and hard to parse, especially the first time you get to him and just see this giant fireball with mirrors circling around him. It feels awkward. And also he just has way too much health, even for 4 Kirbys, or like 3 I guess, because I played this with 2 people and the AI was shitting around in Cabbage Caverns for the final boss for some reason. And the final phases are the obligatory scrolling shooter segments, one an actual fight, although a very easy one, the other one a near unparsable high score minigame underneath the game's credits. I literally cannot tell what's going on at any time. This pile of bosses takes forever, like 20 minutes, and losing doesn't respawn the healing items between phases, so I guess enjoy resetting the game if you lose too hard. I think every individual phase in a vacuum is fine, but it's so bizarrely endless that it's exhausting to even attempt it, especially when you're dragging around a few other people and dealing with all the delay from Switch Online. There's also some obligatory sub-games, all of which are multiplayer, which is pretty cool. Speed Eaters is a reaction game like Samurai Kirby. Crackety Hack is a timing minigame. It's basically one-for-one Megaton Punch, but multiplayer. Boss Endurance is a boss rush you get for 100% completion. And most uniquely, Kirby Wave Ride, a short racing game where you get boost by jumping at the end of waves and ramps, which has a surprising amount of depth and routing and is a decently fun minigame and multiplayer for it. As for presentation stuff, I mean, it's Kirby, of course it's great. You have 4 adorable Kirbys rendered in tiny little pixels, an endless swath of equally cute enemies, and surprisingly detailed bosses between them. This was, however, kind of the beginning of the boring age of Kirby. While I think this game looks good, a lot of Kirby games in this era would use the same sprites. Nightmare and Dreamland earlier, Squeak Squad and Superstar Ultra later would reuse each other's sprites and stick in the same world themes and with similar enemies. I really like the more out-of-the-box level themes, the Haunted Mansion and the Ancient Ruins, but many of them are kinda abstract platforms floating in a themed backgrounds. To their credit, the sub-games feature a very good amount of new sprites and look very solid, which is a nice little bonus. Amazing Mirror does have some good music, albeit on the underwhelming Gameboy Advance, which makes everything sound a bit rough, although that's not to take away from how good the music is. The boss music, especially for the big fights, is perfect, very, very intense, and is almost Sega Genesis core, although many of the level themes are fairly safe and standard. Good, but not coloring outside the lines too much. The game just feels a little too safe in the presentation department. There's nothing that exciting going on in its style or its music. Kirby and the Amazing Mirror doesn't really work for me. I think there's something here. The idea of a Kirby Metroidvania is pretty intriguing, but the systems just don't support that kind of game. There's no wonder to the exploration, no seeing something you can't do yet and being excited to loop back to it, warping to the hub room to get powers for small specific sections that you need to get through to beat the game is exhausting, and the multiplayer rarely adds much beyond calling in the gang for bosses or occasionally bypassing having to go to the hub to open a puzzle door. The levels kinda lack design, the maps are confusing and weird to navigate, and you can't even comfortably look at the map in multiplayer. There's cool bosses, Wiz and the Smash Bros references especially, and a nice collection of abilities, but they're cool things crammed into a game that feels oddly clunky. I enjoyed the experience with my friends, but truthfully a lot of it was kind of bewilderment at how messy the game is. I don't really like being so negative about it, but the game just doesn't really come together even as a goofy co-op game. It's probably not even the worst Kirby game that's ever made, but I wish I liked it a hell of a lot more than I ended up doing.